All right, so today we have on our show Rohit Taneja, founder of Decentro. Decentro is a fintech company which has a vision and mission of making banking API integrations 10x faster and cheaper. They are helping other fintech startups make their go to market much faster. And this is Rohit's second entrepreneurial journey. Before Decentro, he built and exited MyPoolen, another startup in the fintech space. So, with this limited context, I would want Rohit himself to talk about his journey. So, Rohit, let's start with a quick snapshot of where Decentro stands today. And in your journey so far, what have been the major milestones?
Sure, absolutely. No, thanks for having me over, Anuradha. Well, Decentro has, of course, grown by leaps and bounds since we started. It's almost 3 years, since we started the company now. And this was right about the time when the pandemic was coming in, right? So, the first lockdown was happening, and literally just a few days before the lockdown, I put down the papers and said, okay, this is it. We need to start again. Obviously, at that point, I was not aware that a pandemic would be so big, but then it didn't really, the good thing is it didn't really hamper us. It actually helped in general, the overall, digital fintech ecosystem, as you would have noticed. So I would say good time for starting a fintech company, in 2021. And then, of course, the whole macro environment changed as well, drastically recently. But then again, the good thing is the company was already in a stable position, by that time. 3 years old now. We have almost 600 plus companies using us in different forms and factors, and we'll shortly cover what we do as well. Mostly, of course, a lot in the BFSI space, I would say, and processing roughly around 21 million, API hits, which is basically transactions on a monthly basis. So a little over 250 million annually as of now. Massive scale and lots of learnings along the way. Yeah.
Wow, great. This is good for setting the context, Rohit, because especially since this podcast is directed at people who want to start up on their own, or people who are in the early journey of their startups. It is good for them to understand that a startup which has raised Series A, which has quickly scaled within 3 years from scratch, to now, shift gears, go back and look at, how you reached here, and not even like how you the idea and all. I want to go back further, and I want to first focus on your early childhood, the kind of family background you have, because I think a lot of people will be able to relate to you being just one among us and not a superhuman to be able to do it. So I would love to know how your family background was, education background, etc.
Sure, absolutely. No, absolutely, you're right. I think, the relatability helps a lot. So I come from a middle-class family. It's not super rich, not a family wealth kind of a guy. First generation entrepreneur, proud to say that. So one of the first in the family to, start out. In fact, so it was hard for mom and dad initially to accept that, okay, this is actually a career path. It's not a very common thing to start out. Now it has become fairly easier, but back in 2014, almost 9 years ago, it was a whole different ballgame altogether. I think the only success stories were Paytm to some extent, but that too very early. Flipkart was the major one, that was there, which helped instill some confidence, into the minds of parents. I have been a fairly studious child. I would say I was more notorious for being like over studious in the sense, like just remembering everything and that kind of like child who just gets through the exams. Yeah, exactly. So but I love studying. I love books. Even now, I love books. I love reading. Don't get enough time to read, but definitely love reading as much as possible. I think that just the love for reading itself, I would say took me to different places. Took me to, of course, to IIT, which is where got my graduation. Amazing institution, no doubt about that. I'm sure many people who have been there, will tell you the same. Just in terms of the sheer quality of talent that is there. And I think the biggest change actually happened when I went into IIT and not before. Before, of course, it was like just schooling, studying and all. But when I went into IIT, I realized, okay, there's actually something beyond books as well, like in the sense that how do you practically apply these things? How do you benefit the world out of what you're doing? And that is when people typically start thinking about career paths, right? Do you want to be an academic? Do you want to be, maybe some in the creative field, musician, etc., right? And all these paths were open, of course. And the good thing is IIT gives you a lot of opportunities in general. I would say top colleges in India, the top 10 at least, they are well known for like the diversity of options available. So they let you experiment. They let you experiment with internships. Let you experiment with projects, like a lot of different companies as well. So that really helped me, right? So I was actually interning in Sony in Japan for 3 months. This was in 2011. Yeah. And also got a pre-placement offer, which helped me skip this whole interview cycles, like day one companies, day two companies, and all that stuff, right? So skip the placement season, I would say, and just went for that, offers right away. Right. Then I think this happened in 2012, when I was graduating. Went with the offer, went to Japan for 2 years. Right? Then I think in Japan itself, one of the things I noticed was Japan in general is very, I would say, stable, complacent country, right? So it's a fairly developed market. There's not much hustle there, unlike India, right? Because there are not too many problems to be solved.
Correct.
And also there's lack of ecosystem support, in the sense that people do not like working for small companies. So there's like some sort of stigma attached if you go and do a startup, or you work in a small company. Or more so, there's a stigma attached to failure. That if you fail, like the society literally outcasts you. Yeah. So that's like a
harakiri is a word that is popularized by Japanese people, which is literally like professional suicide.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they were like, most of them, I mean, obviously now times are changing, but still I would say maybe 70-80% of the country still thinks like that. Wow. They just go in one company and work for it for their life. That's how they think about it. And that obviously, I would say, was not the career path that I wanted, because it limits your impact on the world, right? So it limits the chances that you have taking a big shot. And that's the way I think about, I would say, my journey and my career path, in the sense that the decisions that I take every day should be helping overall impact on the humanity, in the sense that I should be doing net positive for the world, and I should not be just consuming resources, from the world. That's, I would say, a very high level philosophical thinking that I think about, my purpose from a daily basis. So yeah, Japan was there, and then once I noticed this drastic difference between Japanese lifestyle and Indian lifestyle, I said, okay, I want to make, be in a hustle culture. I don't want to be in like this complacent culture. So I came back to India in 2014, and that is when started the first company, My Pooling. That interestingly came from my college, I would say, days, and like the whole idea came from my college days.
Okay.
Which is everybody who has gone through college, has some social circle. They would have faced this pain point that at some point of time you have to share money with your friends, right? You have to go out, right, in a social setting. You have to send money to XYZ, and sending money or just sharing money between friends is like a painful experience. It's not like it's not a happy memory. Like nobody likes sharing money, like, with friends, or splitting money with friends, and those kind of things. It's a very uncomfortable, awkward situation, typically. So we wanted to make it fun. We said, okay, how do we make money sharing simple and fun, so that people like doing it? They don't dread doing it. And that's how the whole peer-to-peer social angle came into play. That okay, let's create a social app which looks like a social network and not like a payments app. But it ultimately helps you do peer-to-peer payments. At the end. So I think that's how My Pool in general originated. And of course,
I want to take a pause
through a long journey.
Rohit, and I want to zoom in to the fact that you were working at an established company outside India. Obviously, in India, there's a lot of repute attached to working outside India. And then you suddenly made up your mind to come back to India, number one, and then start up on your own. Right. How did that decision, and it's a big decision to make, especially when, you said, even your parents were not primed to their taking a plunge like that.
Right.
So what was that entire thought process? How long were
Mhm.
you toying with the idea? How did you meet your
Mhm.
co-founders? What
Sure.
gave you the courage to put in your papers and just,
Mhm.
start up?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, I have to jog my memory. Back in time, it's been almost 8, 9 years since I started. Um, but yeah, you're right. I still remember. I think it was pretty much a final phone call that I gave to my mom saying, okay, hey, I made up my mind. I'm coming back. And I was like, I can't wait anymore. But it wasn't obviously a spur of the moment decision. It was actually a plan in the making, in the sense that gradually and gradually it was happening every day. In the sense that I used to read, of course, used to read a lot, as I mentioned. So at that point, when I was in Japan as well, I was still reading in general a lot about what's happening in Flipkart, what's happening in the ecosystem in India,
Hmm.
what's happening with startups, what kind of startups are coming in, those kind of things. And that sort of, fueled, I would say, that whole inspiration to, okay, that at some point it does make sense. People are actually doing good things, and looks like there's a vibrant ecosystem that will eventually come in the next 5, 10 years. The thing that I was wondering about was the timing. That when should I take the plunge?
Hmm.
Um, that I think made what was made easier by my observation of how the Japanese companies were evolving, right? So in general, like if you look at, so I was working at Sony, um, and Sony has been probably like Apple of Japan for almost 10, 20 years or more. Right?
Right.
But in the last 5, 10 years, they have been on a decline. Like you would not see as many Sony fans now, right, as you would see Apple fans,
Apple
right?
fans, right.
Right. So I think that speaks to a larger thing, which is in general, the innovation in Japanese companies have been declining. And there's a whole macro effect at play, which is there's a declining population, not many youngsters coming in, like a lot of old population that's there. They're experienced, they're great at what they do, but then they don't have out of the box ideas, right? Which is where, of course, innovation really comes in from. So I think as that observation started setting in, it became clear in the second year for me that, okay, the longer I stay, the harder it will be, for me to get out of this mindset as well.
Correct.
It's like, when you live in a particular environment, right? You start getting framed in that environment as well, right? So
Start becoming
um,
comfortable.
exactly, right? So you do not want to become just like one of them, like later down the line. So you want to stand out, you have to take this stand. Yeah. So I think, yeah, by the second year that became clear, and yeah, in 2014, that is when I started discussing with mom, with dad. Of course, there was always hesitation. They were like, okay, you have a high paying job, how will you survive here, right? What kind of a lifestyle it will be, right?
Hmm.
Um, or of course, then the whole marriage thing later down the line, all those questions come into play. When I said, okay, and this is actually probably the best time to take the risk, because I don't
Hmm.
have any
Young
encumbrances, right? Yeah,
responsibilities. Right.
exactly. So it's easier as well. I can just given the quality of education that we have had, and I know my own capabilities, I can 1 year down the line, I can always go back to a job. It's not a big
Correct.
deal.
That safety net was there.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think having worked 2 years, I was able to save up a lot, right? So which really helped,
Hmm.
just take my mind off money. Like, okay, I don't have to worry about just surviving. I have enough cash for the next few years. So yeah, that's what made it easier. And
Did
take the
you make any budget in terms of, okay, X is my savings and
plunge.
50% of this savings I am ready to part with, even if
Hmm.
this idea doesn't work? Did you calculate in your head the amount of money you're ready to lose before you even
Right,
start?
right. Um, yeah, I did actually. So I think not in terms of money, but I think it was more in terms of time, in the
Okay.
sense that, okay, how much time can I dedicate to
Hmm.
this before we call it off and say, okay, that's it, no more, trials. Um, so in my mind, it was 2 years that, okay, and which I think is the ideal amount of time. Yeah, anybody should devote to one single idea, not too less, not too more than that, because after a certain point, then you need to really pivot or change if that direction is not working out.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think that was the timeline I had in mind.
And did you start off with co-founders, or did you just to take this journey alone?
Right. It was with co-founders. In fact, meeting the co-founder is a very, I would say, coincidental story. and not
Okay.
many people are aware of. Obviously, the ones who are close to me know. So my co-founder Ankit, ex-co-founder in the previous company, Ankit, we met out of all places in Harvard campus in US. Yeah,
Okay.
right at that, there's a statue in the Harvard campus. I think you might have seen in the photos, like in the middle of it. And just next to that statue, yeah, that is where we met for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was like a conference where we had both gone independently. He had come from his college, I had come from my college. Yeah.
That's where you
That's how we
discussed
met. And
the idea. That's where you
uh,
discussed the idea.
yeah, a bit of it. Obviously, at that time, the idea was not yet fully concrete. It was like, in fact, at that point, this was 2012, by the way. So this was just at the time I was graduating. Before graduation, in the final semester is when I had gone there. And yeah, at that time, he was also in the final semester as well. So he was in DC, in Delhi, and I was in Delhi. So fairly, I would say, similar environments where we had both grown in, similar colleges that we had gone to. So I would say the relatability, the comfort, friendship aspect became fairly simple. It was not like a very different background, I would say. But the personalities were very different. Like he's very like outgoing, marketing kind of a person, right? So he's more, and he did his MBA in marketing immediately post that. So he's more into marketing and design and those kind of things. I was into product engineering, the whole that mentality. And I've been a coder, so I used to code as well. So I think that way the synergy became strong over time. That we saw that we both were ambitious. We both came from similar backgrounds in engineering, but very different kind of personalities. And we both wanted to start up at some point of time, right? So yeah, that was pretty much the discussions that were happening during that time.
Very a combination of complementary skills, like on the product side as well as on the business side.
Yeah.
And Rohit, when you were starting off, like you were a 2-member team, how quickly you guys grew in terms of team members? Was it like 5 team members by month 3, or how exactly that progression happened?
Right. Yeah. So the first year we were bootstrapped, right? So the first year there was like literally just 3 people. So we just had one more person who came in. Yeah. 3 people in the entire company. Yeah, who were programming, of course, 2 were programming, 1 was, more marketing, sales. So yeah, I think almost for 8 to 12 months, close to that, almost 10 months, I would say, we were just 3 people, and all bootstrapped. And then in 2015 is when we started raising the first round of capital. We got the angel round, and then we got a seed round immediately post that. Then, of course, it became easier. And then, yeah, we went on to 10 people.
So that first year would have been a year where your conviction would have been tried a lot of times.
Right.
You must have thought about giving up, or there must have been scary situations in terms of, because you were just burning cash for the first year.
Right.
If I'm not wrong, like there were no revenue streams.
That is correct.
The good thing is you also did not incur a lot of expense because it's just a 3-member team. But sometimes, people get into that mode that not seeing any progress, is not going anywhere. Do you have any such moments of self-doubt?
Right. We did actually. Yeah. In fact, went through a lot of, I would say, initial, classic rookie mistakes of founders and, all those trial by fire kind of things that happened to the first company. So interestingly, the third person, he wanted to be a co-founder as well. And yeah, so he was contributing well, initially he was programming as well. But a few things stood out. One, he was not really aligned with the full mission of the company, right? So he was aligned with some part of it. And the second was that Ankit and I felt that, this person will not really fit in the entire founding team ecosystem, right? So it's like, okay, we already have these complementary personalities and we're already able to handle XYZ, like I was able to handle product tech, and him marketing and business. So then this third person doesn't really fit in, like doesn't make sense, for a third person to be there just for the sake of it. Right? So those kind of questions came in, right, which of course meant the whole sustainability of the founding team. Then, we had to take a hard call. So yeah, faced a slightly tough time during that, initial 1 year as well. Eventually, of course, that person left, which was beneficial for the company in hindsight. So then it was just these two founders. So he went on to do his master's in the US, and we both continued on the startup journey. But yes, you're right. I think these moments were hard, right, as an early stage founder. But they really toughened me as well. So I think I really credit, I would say, the journey that we have. It seems easier now because we've seen those tough times earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And how soon did you guys start having investor conversations, Rohit? Because these days, like I see a lot of founders start approach investors even at a paper idea stage, right?
Right.
You guys were bootstrapped for almost a year. So was it like you were building off those conversations till you have something in hand, or you started your conversations and were working on the feedback received from the investors?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually the former, which is we actually held off, conversations. And I think and I give credit to Ankit here, my ex-co-founder, who really knew, I would say, how to handle investors. I was a noob at that. I did not know what investor conversations look like, what does a VC mean, and all. Because as I told you, I didn't come from that background. Right? I've been more on the geeky side. It's now that I've evolved, into that whole, like, a more different founder. But I think, so I think Ankit really helped and stepped up on that side, and he was able to handle, I would say, the initial angels thought process behind whom to approach, all that stuff. And one of the key things for us was product market fit, which is actually the number one advice that I give to any of my portfolio companies or any investor, or not investor, founder that I meet, is you really have to look for PMF. Right? If you do not have PMF, doesn't make sense. Whatever money you raise, it's mostly going to waste. Right? Correct. So do not raise capital until you are 100% sure that yes, this is exactly the path that the company will take. So yeah, I think that was the thing which we were missing in that first year, where we actually were B2B earlier. The B2C idea came in later on. Yeah. Okay. And so that is when the whole product market fit came into being, and then we realized now is the right time to raise capital.
Got it. And I believe, Rohit, starting out the second time would be a big advantage with all the experience you gathered at MyPoolin of not just building, but also successfully exiting a startup. And like you rightly said, all the rookie mistakes, right? You must have avoided at Decentro. But also, I think when you're starting out the second time, there is a lot of baggage of expectation from yourself, because now you believe that, and you also have somewhere, all this consciousness also comes in that people are looking up to me now. What do I do next? Right. So compared to starting out the first time when you're almost like a child and you can take that leap of faith, the second time and the knowledge that you build in also has its own curse in terms of it makes you more cautious, more wary, right? So how is the second time journey of starting Decentro different from the first one? And how did that idea come along?
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. There's always it's like classic performance anxiety, right? That's you're in the arena, and then you already have done it once, like at some scale, and then can you outperform yourself? Right? Yeah. So and it has to be bigger. It can't be smaller, than the last time, right? So so I think you're right. It has to be better. So otherwise, there's no point, right, of starting out again. So you're right, these pressures are there, but then you have to take that pressure in a healthy way, right? It's really that pressure that also fuels you, daily, that really keeps you up. That this is exactly why, you started out to make sure that, yes, you do not say underperform yourself, right? I think, as I said, so one of the key things that drives me is not just the company's impact. It's also okay, what is the company doing overall, right, for the humanity or for the world? So are we having a net positive effect, right, on the world? So monetary aside, is the world a better place fundamentally, before we came in the picture? Correct. And I think that higher level motivation really keeps, I would say, the entire team, going, including me. And that's really what I try to instill, in myself and the team as well, that, okay, great, money is great, that's coming in, but look at, okay, the change that you're doing in these lives of these companies, right, or the customers eventually. And the good thing is they're able to see it firsthand, right? Many of them actually interact with the customers, so they do see that difference firsthand. I think another thing that really helped the second time around was MyPoolin is, or if there was a MyPoolin today, and there are actually, by the way, there are a few clones of MyPoolin today that are there in the ecosystem, but they're very small right now. So many of those are our customers, right? So now I know exactly the kind of pain they've gone through, and I know exactly the kind of things they need. So it's like we're building a product, and I know what to build because I will use it myself. Yeah. Okay. So that being a second time founder in the space which is serving the first, company that I started, makes it, I would say, also easier, right? And it actually makes it, I would say, the motivation becomes higher, right? Because I'm solving for all the fintechs pretty much in the country. Yeah. So that's how I look at it.
Sure. In fact, it was my assumption that probably because during your journey at MyPoolin, the whole pain that you would have gone through in terms of making the process of banking integration easy for your startup would have probably inspired you to start Decentro.
Right.
And
that is true.
So just taking a pause here, Rohit, and I'll request you to, for the uninitiated in the audience, and because fintech seems like a daunting subject to most people, if you could just explain in a simple layman term what Decentro does and how it helps its clients, it'll be great.
Sure, absolutely. So I think of us as building pipes and foundation, for fintech. So I'll take two analogies. One is you're building a house. So ultimately, the first thing that you want is the foundation of the house, right? The foundation has to be strong. It has to be modular and flexible enough that you're able to build whatever you want on top. Like it should not be rigid, any kind of room you want, any kind of space you want, you should be able to have on top of the foundation. Right? So that's why the foundation becomes super important, but it's also invisible to the people who are living in the house.
Right?
Like people don't know about it, right? People don't think about it. That's the kind of role we are playing for the fintech ecosystem or the banking ecosystem. So to give you an example there, let's say a small finance bank or an NBFC wants to launch a new digital application in the market. This could be a digital loan application on the mobile app, could be a digital bank application like the HDFC Pays app, for example, or the Kotak 811, that kind of equivalent. In order to launch that, the same thing applies. Before they launch the app, they need to make sure that whatever they need from the customers, whatever they need from the ecosystem has to be available in the form of APIs, right? Or some software, essentially. So that's the foundation, right? So that's essentially what you're building. You're building this software foundation to enable BFSI, the whole banking, financial services, and insurtech industry, and also the fintech ecosystem in the country, launch their applications. And the key thing that we're differentiating is this foundation allows them to launch 10x faster, like literally 10x faster in terms of timelines, which, as you can imagine, it reduces the cost by 10x as well because your time goes down of launching. And you also are able to optimize for OpEx, right? So once the foundation is set, you don't have to worry about it. It's like it's there. You can just keep on experimenting and building on. So that's essentially what Decentro does.
Got it. And if I understand correctly, for Decentro to be successful, a big factor would be how many banks does Decentro integrate with, right? How many banks are on board on your platform? Because then the client organizations do not need to have the hassle of going up and partnering with these banks and then building infrastructure basis each bank, right? So this is the main facility that you're providing. This is your biggest value addition to the ecosystem.
Sure.
And when you were just starting out, right, with Decentro, this would have been one of your primary targets to go up to a bank and partner with them, and banks being those large organizations who don't, care about smaller players. How did you crack your first bank, which I assume would have been one of the biggest milestones for the business?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think so. A number of banks partnering with us. Yeah, it is the key differentiator, or rather, I would say the initial key factor that really helps a company select Decentro. But also it's the software, right? So it's like what new innovation we are bringing on top of the banking software.
Right.
So is it, as I said, is it 5x, 10x faster? Is it more stable? Does it reduce my cost? And all those questions as well. So it's a combination of both. It's a combination of the partnership as well as the software that we build out. I think, again, going back to the benefit of being a second-time founder and also having run a company in the fintech space, the good thing that happens is a lot of the banks already know you, and because you already worked with them in some capacity in the first time around, which is exactly what happened. So I was able to leverage the Yes Bank relationship. Yes Bank was actually our first bank partner. Yeah.
Okay.
In general as well, Yes Bank has been I would say, very supportive bank for startups across the ecosystem.
Okay.
So really, I would say hats off to them in terms of being the torchbearer, at least in the banking world. So yeah, had some good contacts there. The people were very happy. They obviously knew what MyPulin was doing at that time, and MyPulin had integrated with Yes Bank APIs as well. So we pretty much knew, I would say, the ins and outs of the product team at Yes Bank. So that made it easier. So I just reached out to them, and they were, of course, very happy to get started and give us access to the APIs.
In this whole process, once you have a couple of banks on board, it's far easier to then bring around other people. Even if you don't have connects there, if you have a few logos already, getting logos becomes easier. And what about the client side, Rohit? Like, I'm assuming that there must have been competition when you guys launched. And would have been difficult to convince a client to choose you over the established players already in the market. How did you get your first one? Any interesting story around it?
Right. Yeah, I think the first customer also came out of MyPulin journey as well. So yeah, I think a lot of the groundwork was laid for Decentro, which is why I mentioned I think the struggle period for us was not that high. It was not that painful. Yeah, I think so. Really, I would say obviously there's a combination of being in the right space, the right time, and with the right people. So a lot of luck involved as well when you start out. But yeah, really thankful to the first few customers who came in. They actually, so to probably take you back in time, MyPulin eventually got acquired by Wibmo in 2017. Yeah, and Wibmo was in the payments authentication space, and then PayU came along in 2019 and acquired the entire group as well. So PayU, of course, being a PG company, Wibmo was actually developing its own PG as well by the time PayU came in.
Okay.
And MyPulin was the one, the MyPulin team was the one designated to build the entire PG for Wibmo, which is when we found the first customer for the PG side for Wibmo. And the same customer then, once PayU came in and acquired the entire group, said, okay, hey, these guys are very slow. I want to jump in, just like video. Whatever you're building, give it to me. Okay. So yeah, that happened. Yeah.
So instead of you going and convincing and struggling, there was a ready customer for you because of your background. Cool. Got it. And not at Decentro, I'm sure at Decentro you had already built a certain amount of credibility, and you guys raised your first round also pretty quickly at Decentro, right? Within what, 3 months of launch, 6 months of launch?
Within 1.5 months. This was actually pre-product. Yeah. This is pre-product. Yeah, the product was just a product.
Once you've raised around, once the PR is out that you've raised funding, probably it's much easier to hire people.
Yeah.
Because then they don't see you as something which may shut down in the next 6 months.
Right.
But back in your MyPulin days, when you were just starting out, and you told that it was a 1.5 years of big struggle. How did you even convince that third person to join you, who I'm assuming was your first hire, right?
Right. Yeah. So actually, the third person was a school friend. So school friends, I realized, are great places to reach out. In fact, more than college friends, the reason why school friends, I would say, become the best people to hire is because with college friends, it's still that friendship angle. It's like more of a very casual friendship kind of angle, and you don't want that to be carried over as it is into the startup.
Correct.
Right. So so I think school friends are still distant, right? They're like, okay, you've long forgotten, right? And not that close anymore. So, easier to reach out, easier to, hire professionally. So I think that's really, I would say, the place if I were to recommend someone to, like, in that position, from running a bootstrap company and, starting out and hiring the first person, to look at. The second amazing place to hire from are events.
Okay.
Really, like, yes, really good events. But now there are so many events happening. I lost count. But I think pretty much every day there's some nice event happening, in some corner of the country. Which is a great sign, right? So that shows that people are really interested in learning what's out there, what's happening. They really want to contribute to the ecosystem as well. So yeah, I think events are an amazing place. We found a few hires at events as well.
Okay.
And yeah, I think post the fifth or sixth, it becomes easier again, because then you already have some foundation laid in. Then you can, take bets on the next people. But yeah, the first 5 or 6 are really cool.
And I think that the challenge, which is that you cannot offer too much in terms of compensation.
Right.
Why it may look like a challenge to early stage startup founders, it is actually a blessing in disguise, because it is hard to crack a person. But once you crack a person, even with that unattractive compensation, you can be pretty sure that this person is not joining for monetary incentives, but because he or she really believes in the vision and mission, or really believes in your leadership or your charisma. So the ability of that person to stay for longer periods of time, even if you're going to struggles, is much higher.
Right. Absolutely. You're right. I think it's like classic saying, right? Where the more constraints you have, the more innovative you will be, right? So even today, like even at Decentro, we're not known for spending a lot, right? So I literally evaluate every penny that goes out. Do we really need this? So yeah, it has to be that way. And that is really what instills financial discipline as well.
Right. So you talked about frugality, Rohit, and interestingly, I was about to ask you, like, if you have to draw parallels between your journey at MyPoolin and your journey at Decentro, they are both fintech, no doubt, but very different in terms of MyPoolin being a B2C startup and Decentro being a B2B, right? But what are those common ideals, common values which helped you in both your journeys? Like, one, you were starting out from a place of not having much capital, not having much experience. You were starting from a very different place, different spaces. So there are a lot of differences between the two journeys, but what are those commonalities in terms of your approach, your ideals, your principles, which you think you would like to stick to, and which, if you look back, helped you a lot as a founder?
Sure, absolutely. I think having product as the foundation, in the sense that like, we don't think about anything else until the product is really good. So the product has to be like really solid, like 10x better, like minimum, from what the market is already at. And if it's just an incremental benefit, then we don't really, I would say, press the pedal. We hold back, make sure everything is sorted before we go into the market.
Got it.
And this applies to our sales, this applies to our fundraising, this applies to everything that we do. And maybe it's like a personality trait coming out of the founder, into the company, in the sense that I have OCD about preparation and planning.
Right.
So I'm not known to take that spontaneous plunges and those kinds of things. So if I do something, I like plan it out well, and then go in the market. So that, I think, has probably been one of the key philosophies which has been common, across MyPoolin and Decentro. The second thing that helps is having faith in people, right? So I put a lot of faith in the people that I hire, the people that I partner with, and generally, like, I'm not a very cynical, or a skeptical person, so to say. Like, if I'm interacting with somebody for the first time, my default assumption will be that this guy is good.
Good.
The default assumption is not that it's bad. So which is hard, right? Which is hard in a country like India as well, right? It's such a low trust society. But I think that has really helped in building a converse trust of the team on me as well, right? So when you trust the people, they automatically start trusting you as well.
Correct.
It's a mutual relationship, right? It goes in there. So I think that has been a very core philosophy that helped build a strong team, in MyPool and Decentro as well. And I think third thing has been to aim for larger, I would say, larger impact from the company's perspective, right? In the sense that the company should not become a mediocre company. It should actually have an outsized return. It should take a leap of faith. So if we are aiming for an industry and I see a solution that can, give us 100x return, but also has a high chance of failure, it's like high risk, high reward thing. I'll probably obviously weigh the risk, but at the same time, if the rewards seem worth it, we'll go for it.
Got it.
So that has been, I would say, another commonality. Between these two.
So if I have to summarize, you talked about frugality first, a very high excellence mindset, a high trust environment for the team to build, and then a high risk appetite. Because what I found really interesting about your metric to measure success, Rohit, is not in monetary terms or in terms of the number of team members I have, the amount of money I've raised, the amount of clients I have, but in terms of what is the impact I can make on society in general. And when you have a metric like that, it is hard to get disappointed, because if you're working hard, you're definitely going to have some or the other impact. So if you're measuring your success by the impact you're making, I think in general that feeling of satisfaction, fulfillment is natural. One last question, and then we will jump into our rapid fire section, Rohit. Sure. One last question. You talked about rookie mistakes you committed at MyPool, and I'm sure if you look back even 3 years ago, you must have made some mistakes at Decentro. Do you want to summarize a couple of, let's say, 3 to 4 mistakes that you have yourself made, or you have seen first-time founders typically make?
Sure.
Which can, help our listeners avoid them themselves.
Sure. I think quite a few. One is, of course, I spoke about high trust environment, right? Now, there are pros and cons of that, right? So the pros is obviously you build a great, high trustworthy team, and vice versa. But the con is sometimes some bad actors will also come in. Where you assume the person was good, but then no, he was evil, in hindsight, and then he actually tried to do some hard reputation to the reputation of the company. So I think, that obviously with Decentro as well, we faced a couple of bad hires where we noticed, I would say later in hindsight, where we should have noticed them earlier. So that would be one key thing, where even though you want to have trust, but at the same time, you still should be cautious and
correct.
That trust building should be gradual. Like it should not be all on one day. Make sure that you give them time to, earn your trust as well.
Blind. It shouldn't be blind trust.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that was a classic rookie mistake. Obviously now we become much more mature, but yes, I would say every early stage founder goes through that at some point of time. I think the second was, and this was more in MyPool, and where we we're placing a lot of emphasis on branding, PR, that kind of thing. That it should be a big brand, we should do good PR about it, right? All of that stuff. But then once I realized that, this goes against having a good product in the first place. Like without having a good product, the 3R will not help, anybody. So that was another classic rookie mistake, where we learned quickly that, it's more important to have the right product. And if users love it, they will automatically do your PR. Like you don't have to, get a PR done for yourself. So that's essentially, I would say, the second rookie mistake is that. Yeah.
I also noticed on your website, Rohit, that you've written quite a bit. Like from from the beginning of your journey, you have been. It's almost like building in public, which is gaining traction these days, right? Yeah. That you want to openly share what you're doing, how you're doing it.
Right.
I think that is one thing I would really want to see more and more founders do, because this is one thing I feel is lacking in our, at least in Indian ecosystem. People don't share as much, which a lot of people. Quickly
Yeah.
now, I will be shooting one-liner questions, and whatever comes to mind quickly, please answer.
Sure.
So 3 traits you would look for in a founding team today if you were to invest your own capital.
Right. Complementary skills for sure. A mutual overlap of some kind, like they should have either worked together, been friends at some point, right? Those kind of things. And third is ambition.
Third is, sorry, I didn't get it.
Ambition. Third is ambition.
Got it. It is said that you are the average of 5 people you spend your time with. Who are those 5 people in your life that you spend most of your time with?
Sure. Definitely, my co-founder, pretty obvious. Then my wife as well. Then I have 3 very, more of course, but 3 really close friends, from college. 2 are entrepreneurs. 1 is a non-entrepreneur. So yeah, these are the 5 I would say. So
very healthy.
I would say this diverse set. Yeah.
Very
Yes,
healthy,
yeah.
because you also don't want to be in an echo chamber of only founders around you. So yes.
Exactly.
Where do you see Decentro 5 years from now?
Definitely a global company. We are already investing heavily, across multiple countries as well. So global company with at least 5,000 customers or more, and definitely more than $1 billion in valuation. Hopefully public by then, or if not, going public soon. Yeah.
Okay. One thing that you would like to change about the startup ecosystem in India. I have already told that one thing, so you cannot repeat that, but choose yours. Yeah.
Right. Sure. I think being bold and contrarian, so I think a lot of people still go down the common path, which is okay. What is hot right now? So it's like the curious case of deciding what to work on. A lot of people still let the market dictate it for them. That okay, hey, this is hot right now. Let me do this. Whereas that is not the right way. Because then sure, you might have a good idea, but then you will not necessarily have the same ambition. Because you won't be personally motivated by that. Right? That is a very major thing I would change. Across the ecosystem.
Yeah, makes sense. 3 investors you look up to and why? From the Indian
Axel, I think they're sure. So you mean it can be funds as well, right? They don't
absolutely
need to be
any 3 investors. Yeah, it could be an organization or an individual, but from Indian startup ecosystem.
Sure, absolutely. I think Axel definitely. One, we have had experience of working with them in my pool, and they're one of the investors. Really, I would say systematic. Very organized people. The people that I interacted with. Those. Then second, I would say YC. Right. So of course, like the second best investors that I interacted with. Again, similar feedback on them. Amazing community, amazing support. Right. Really very, very supportive. And third, I think could be an angel, I would say. Kunal Shah. He's really, again, someone who takes the bet on people once he likes them, and is passive as well at the same time, in the sense that he doesn't, put his mission forward. He's like, okay, whatever you want to do, great. Yes, exactly.
Great list. 3 founders to idolize and why. And here I'll not restrict you to just India. 3 founders across the world.
Sure. Right. I would say one, the founder of Airbnb, right? So, I think his journey has been phenomenal. Again, he had a extremely, struggling period at the time when he was bootstrapping, early days. Definitely, I would say an inspiring journey, and also a design-oriented journey as well. So very different journey, I would say, from a regular founder perspective. So yeah, that would be one. Then Elon Musk, no doubt, pretty much top of the ladder, right? I think the diversity of his companies, right? The ambition that he has is insane. Yeah, I think these two globally. Third would be Stripe founders, Patrick and John Collision. So yeah, again, similar gutsy ambition of like building a payments infrastructure for the internet when nothing was moving in terms of payments, at that point of time, and solving a really hard problem, like building a payments infrastructure just like what we are building is really hard. So yeah, these three I would say. Yeah.
Cool. An interesting white space where you think Indian founders can build a highly scalable, a problem that nobody is currently solving for.
Sure.
And this is a tough one.
I would like to see more automation, like hardware. Yeah. Sure. No, I think I do have some ideas. I think one is I would like to see more automation, like hardware automation, in the sense of either drones being used more. Like I don't see enough drone startups, I would say, and there's a lot more that drones can do, which they're not doing right now. And equal to that, any kind of humanoid or simple robot, inside the house, right? So starting from say something like an automated vacuum cleaner to much more complex problem solving, in construction businesses and factories as well, right? I think that hardware automation, robotic automation as well is something, which I would say is a white space, in India, and India is poised to benefit a lot given the manufacturing scale that we have.
Got it. Top 3 books you would recommend to people who are planning to start up or early stage founders?
0 to 1 for sure. Really amazing book too, again, because they are in that journey, 0 to 1. They should also read, like I read biographies a lot, right? So definitely read the biographies, autobiographies as much as possible. My favorite is Elon Musk's biography.
Okay.
And the third would be for a later stage when they scale up the 0 to 1 and they enter the 1 to 10 journey. This would be the hard thing about hard things.
Got it. And one last piece of advice to inspire founders on starting this difficult journey. Something motivating.
Sure. Right. I think the best motivation is just do it. Like don't listen too much to what the society is saying and what. Or rather, I would say, to put it differently, don't listen to your relatives, aunts, and uncles. Just like do not listen to them ever. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Rohit. This was very insightful, and we wish you all the best in your journey. You have been a very humble, down-to-earth, ambitious, hardworking founder, and your journey, I'm sure, is going to inspire a lot in our audience. Thank you so much for spending time with us. All the best.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.